Hey everybody, welcome back to Spooky Scary Storytime. Tonight we are doing a deep dive on the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. The Stanley Hotel is arguably one of the most haunted hotels in America, and it's a hotel so haunted that it even gave Stephen King a nightmare when he stayed there. It actually inspired the movie The Shining. Stephen King and his wife Tabitha were staying at the hotel in 1974. It was off season, the hotel was mostly abandoned. They go to dinner in the grand ballroom by themselves, and after dinner they go to sleep. Stephen King awoke in the middle of the night with a horrible nightmare about his son being chased through the halls, terrified by a fire hose. He woke up, he got out of bed, he lit a cigarette, and by the time he finished the cigarette, he had outlined the entire script of The Shining in his mind. He and his wife were staying in Suite 217, which is now known as the Stephen King Room, and actually in 1994, Jim Carrey stayed there. They were filming Dumb and Dumber, and the movie was being filmed in Estes Park, Colorado, so the cast was staying at the hotel. Jim Carrey wanted Suite 217 because he had heard about the Stephen King lore and knew that Stephen King had said in interviews that the dream didn't feel like just a nightmare. It felt like a transmission, which is creepy. So he specifically requested Suite 217. But the first night after checking in, something terrified him so bad in the night that he ran out, leaving his shoes and all his belongings, and he refused to go back in. He actually refused to re-enter the hotel for the rest of the time they were filming and insisted to stay at another hotel in a nearby town. What's crazy about this Jim Carrey story is that Jim Carrey is known to be this open personality. He talks openly about his mental health, his philosophical views, his personal relationships. But for some reason, when asked in interviews about his stay at the Stanley Hotel and what terrified him in the middle of the night, he won't answer. He either avoids the question entirely or he just says, I don't want to talk about that place. So now we'll get into the story that was submitted to me for Spooky Scary Storytime that led me to go down this rabbit hole to begin with. And then we'll talk about what actually happened at the Stanley and the history behind it. So a man named Ryan, which is not his real name, shared his story about him and his girlfriend, Chloe. Chloe and he had met at work. He was a realtor, she was an interior designer, and the company that Ryan worked for had hired Chloe, or Chloe's company, to stage a house that his company was selling. They meet, they hit it off, and Chloe was everything that Ryan was not. She was the dark to his light. She was very into art, into aesthetics, into gothic decor, as he described it, and he was more just a normal dude, mainstream stuff, and she was always turning him on to things that he wouldn't have listened to or seen otherwise. A few things that she liked included horror movies, true crime, and the movie The Shining. She was a super fan. So for her birthday, they had been together a few years at this point. They had bought a house, gotten a dog, done the whole thing. Ryan wants to make it really special. He also wants to propose. And although they didn't live in Colorado, he knew that she wanted to go visit the Stanley Hotel. It was on her bucket list. She had expressed this numerous times to him. He books a trip. He calls the hotel to book because he specifically wants Suite 217, the Stephen King suite. Unfortunately, it's not available for the weekend that they're going, but the receptionist on the phone assures him that she can get him another famously haunted room. So he's like, sure, do it. And he books it. He tells Chloe that they are going on this trip, and she doesn't know that they're staying at the Stanley, but she knows they're going to Colorado. She's excited. When they get to Colorado, he takes her to the Stanley, and she is just so appreciative. She is so happy to be there. They check in. The hotel is beautiful. It is decorated in a timeless way. They check in the room. Nothing strange happens. They go to dinner. They come back. The first night they're there, Chloe's in the bathroom. She's getting ready for bed. She comes out, and she tells Ryan, I hear piano music. And he listens, but he doesn't hear any piano music. And he says, no, I don't hear anything. Or maybe it's from the lobby, or maybe it's from the hallway. Either way, they don't think anything of it. At some point in the night, after they fall asleep, she wakes up and she's complaining about hearing piano music again. She's like, it's so loud, I can't sleep. And he says, it's in your head, I don't hear anything. But he thinks maybe she just has more sensitive ears, or maybe it's in her mind, because one of the things about the Stanley Hotel is that a lot of guests actually report hearing this ghostly piano music. So he thinks that maybe she's read too much into it, she knows too much about the hotel, but he just doesn't believe that there's actually piano music anywhere that is really audible, and that it's in her mind. The next morning, they wake up, they go to breakfast or brunch. I'm not sure if they went to breakfast or brunch at the hotel, but when they come back to the room, pretty much immediately, Chloe is ill. She thinks she has food poisoning. All of her symptoms point to the fact that she has food poisoning. She's vomiting, she's throwing up, she can't keep anything down, she's dehydrated, and she basically spends the next day in bed, and that is her birthday. So unfortunately, Ryan is unable to execute his plan of proposal, and he doesn't, and he's really disappointed. She still assures him that she's having a great time and she's really appreciative that he brought her there, and they are flying back the following day because, again, this is just a weekend trip. The following night, they're back home. She's starting to feel better from her bout of food poisoning, but she starts sleepwalking the first night that they're back. And this wasn't that weird because Ryan chalked it up to just her being dehydrated and losing a bunch of fluids and from throwing up and not being able to keep anything down. So they don't think anything of it. He's like, she's just delirious, you know? But that continues, even though she has no other symptoms from her food poisoning for weeks. And eventually she starts complaining about hearing piano music in the middle of the night. And they just don't really understand what's going on. She had never had a problem with sleepwalking before, and everything else in her life is seemingly normal. She's still going to work, although she is obviously tired from sleepwalking. But there's nothing strange other than the fact that sometimes she finds her way back to bed, and other times he actually wakes up and has to go find her to bring her back to bed. I guess at one point during one of these sleepwalking episodes, she looks at him and says, "I don't love you. I don't want to marry you." And he gets her back in bed, and he kind of gets in his head about it because he still hasn't proposed, but obviously he was going to. He brings it up in the morning to her, and she has no recollection of it. And he gets into this long conversation with her about like, well, I want to marry you. And she's like, well, I want to marry you too. So he ends up proposing to her, but in this weird roundabout way that was not ideal. So now they're engaged. This continues, and this goes on for months, and Ryan is growing concerned because now the topic of her sleepwalking is a constant topic of conversation in their house. The topic of piano music is a constant topic of conversation, and he doesn't feel annoyed, but he feels a little burdened by it, which I think anybody would, honestly. Obviously, you want your partner to get help and be healthy, but also at what point are you going to be like, okay, like this needs to be addressed? They don't have a piano, so that music is not coming from inside their house. They think maybe a neighbor has a piano. Maybe she has just better ears and better hearing than he does. But either way, Ryan suggests that she gets into therapy. He's like, something deeper is going on. I think that you need to address it. And she's like, okay, you know, I'll try it. So she starts going to therapy. During all of this, they're putting her on different sleep medications. Nothing is really helping. And actually, some of the medications she's on end up making things worse. She has all these other side effects that she just didn't really want to sign up for. About 2 months after they get back and after the sleepwalking starts, she orders some Ring cameras. And she tells Ryan that she wants to install them in their living room so that she can track herself and see what she's doing at night. And he says, I don't know how that's going to help, but if you think that that's going to help solve this problem, then I'm open to it. So she installs 2 Ring cameras in their living room. And what they find on these Ring cameras actually terrifies them. She's sleepwalking a lot more than either of them had previously thought. It's not just once a night. It's not just twice a night. It's 2, 3, 4 times a night. She's walking into the living room at 1, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. Sometimes she walks in, turns around and leaves. Other times she goes over, stands at the window, looks out, and then turns around and leaves. Other times she gets down on her knees and prays at the window. And this is out of character for Chloe because Ryan said that she is agnostic. She believes that something may be out there, but she's never really been a religious person. She doesn't pray. She doesn't go to church. So the fact that she's praying in her sleepwalking episodes is strange. The creepiest thing that happened that they caught on camera is at one point she walks into the living room, walks over to the window, kneels down, says a prayer, gets up, walks over to the Ring camera, looks dead in the Ring camera, and whispers, "I'm with her." When I read that line in his email, that like gave me chills more than anything else. So Chloe and him have talked extensively about it. Obviously, it's still an ongoing issue, and he shared this story because they are seeking help actively. She's still in therapy. She is trying to deal with it. She believes that something may have attached itself to her at the Stanley Hotel. He does not think that's possible. He thinks that it's a mental issue, that she's experiencing some kind of like psychosis in her sleep. But other than this, they don't really have any problems. So I originally posted this story to TikTok. And that's what led me to do this deep dive on the hotel, because I was like, I need to know what else is going on there. Like, has anyone else experienced an attachment or some other kind of thing? And there turns out there are a ton of reports of people seeing apparitions or just feeling this sense of like psychological horror while staying at this hotel. So we're going to start all the way back when this hotel was built. The Stanley was built originally in 1909 by Freeland Oscar Stanley, who was the same guy behind the Stanley Steamer automobile. He built it as a luxury mountain retreat for the rich and successful, basically his friends. He had suffered with tuberculosis for a long time and thought that the crisp mountain air helped, and he wanted to build something that matched the majesty of the surroundings. But from the beginning, things were strange. And what was intended as a place for the most wealthy, the most successful to convene and mingle became a place where horror and history kind of intertwined, because just 2 years after the Stanley opened its doors in 1911, there was an explosion in room 217, now the Stephen King suite. And a chambermaid named Elizabeth Wilson walked into the room with a lit candle. The hotel had been experimenting with coming onto the power grid. It was relatively new, but they had gas lamps as backup. There was a gas leak unbeknown to Elizabeth Wilson, And when she walked in with a lit candle, it caused a massive explosion that actually blew her through the floor and landed her in the ballroom. She survived, actually, likely due to the corset she was wearing that protected her internal organs, but she was severely electrocuted. In the fall, she actually only suffered 2 broken ankles and she returned to work shortly thereafter. But some people still say that she stayed in room 217. Some guests have reported their clothes being unpacked or folded without them having anything to do with it. Some people report the lights turning on and off. And interestingly enough, some unmarried couples have reported an unseen force that seems to get between them, as if whatever entity this is disapproves of unmarried couples sharing a bed. Over the years, a lot of hotel staff has talked openly about the amount of guests that request room changes in the middle of the night after staying in room 217. Now, room 401 is also notoriously haunted, but by a male entity. Room 401 is in the most active wing of the hotel, but it also used to be the servants' quarters. And the people who have stayed in room 401 report this very stern, disciplinarian, very real presence that appears to them while sleeping there. In 401, hundreds of guests have reported the closet doors opening and closing by themselves. Some male guests have complained of being touched in their sleep. And in one case, a woman said that she woke up in the middle of the night to the closet door being opened, and then a male was standing in the closet only to vanish right before her eyes. There are many ghost tours that go through this hotel, and one tour guide claims to have a recording of a male voice whispering, "Get out," in room 401, although audio experts can't determine the source of this voice. And then there's the grand staircase known as the Vortex. Of course, it's known as the Vortex. But this is the grand staircase that connects the lobby to the upper floors, and the staff believes that it's a portal where energy and ghosts pass through. I was able to find this photo of that vortex staircase, but phenomena here includes photographs capturing orbs, misty figures, and full-bodied apparitions, tour guests feeling sudden dizziness, cold winds, or pressure on their chest, and a photo taken by a visitor in 2016 appeared to show a young girl in period clothing at the top of the stairs, a girl no one had seen during the tour. Ghost hunting groups bring electromagnetic field meters here and often record spikes even when no electronics are nearby. And here we have the music room where you see the piano. Could this be the source of where the ghostly piano music is coming from, even when no one's playing? But this beautifully preserved space often echoes with something that's just stranger than music. Staff have reported hearing a piano playing softly at night, even though it's locked shut. The unmistakable sound of high heels walking on hardwood floors. Tourists have even captured video of the curtains moving without wind and then music notes resonating without anyone in the room. So some believe that this is the spirit of Flora Stanley, which was Stanley's wife, the original builder of the hotel. And she was actually a trained pianist and loved to entertain guests. But even after death, it seems that she still wants to perform. There's also a series of tunnels underneath the Stanley. Like, of course there is. If you guys know me, if you followed here for a while, you know I love a good tunnel story. But these tunnels were not built for any nefarious reason originally. They were actually just built so that staff could travel underneath the hotel without disturbing guests. But now these are part of the ghost tours at the hotel, and for good reason. A lot of people in these tunnels report sudden temperature drops, which is common in experiencing or encountering a spirit, as I've been told. Others report hearing disembodied whispers. And there's apparently a well-known spirit down there that's known to inhabit the tunnel, and his name is just Paul, and I love that. But Paul is known to shush guests when they're being too loud or talking when a tour guide is talking. So apparently, I don't know, he just doesn't like rudeness. But that's not all. On the 4th floor, that is known as the children's wing. That is where historically nannies and children stayed. And up here, there's a lot of activity, a lot of paranormal activity. It's also arguably the most upsetting. Up here, guests often hear the sounds of children's laughter, children running down the halls, nannies shushing them. Doorknobs of the rooms here are known to rattle and twist with no one on the other side. There is an entity called Lucy who ghost hunters believe is a teenage girl, and she actually often tries to communicate with guests and with ghost hunters. Many ghost hunters claim to have recordings of Lucy. They have claimed to have direct answers from her when asked specific questions, including yeses, nos, and other information. So why is there so much spiritual activity at the Stanley? Interestingly enough, the hotel is built on a foundation of quartz and limestone. And quartz and limestone are both materials that paranormal investigators and researchers and theorists suggest amplify energy or spiritual power. This is similar to the idea of residual hauntings, where emotional energy can imprint on a location if the emotion was strong enough. Other people argue that it's just all in the guests' heads, that they bring this idea of the Stanley Hotel with them when they visit, inspired often by The Shining. It's that in combination with the preserved history, with the long history. But either way, one thing is for certain, which is guests that stay at this Stanley don't just stay there, they experience it. I'm going to read you a couple quotes that just like chilled me to my core about this. From the Atlantic Paranormal Society on a Ghost Hunters 2006 episode, the Taps teens stayed overnight at the hotel, and what they captured became one of their most compelling episodes. Jason Hawes, the Taps co-founder, said, "This is one of the most active places we've ever investigated. In the music room, I saw a table move by itself, and we heard footsteps upstairs when no one was there." Their crew also recorded the sound of the door slamming by themselves and creaking in room 401, despite it being empty at the time. Amy Bruni of Kindred Spirits and the Ghost Hunters alum said, "The Stanley isn't scary in horror movie sense. It's more like it's alive. You feel it watching. It's intelligent." Let me know what you guys think. If you enjoyed this one, let me know if you want me to do other haunted places deep dives. I would love to get further into the subject. And if you want me to do that, let me know in the comments which place or hotel you want me to deep dive next. I love you all. Thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to hit subscribe.